so today approximately 90% of children in the US play video games. And more than 90% of those video games do include violence. This growing statistic is why there is much controversy in society about if violence in video games does have an effect on the youth. Hello guys, my name is Desiree, and I will be responding to the claim that violent video games have zero effect on our youth. My opponent's secondary claims include that the youth is more affected by violence and other media, that violent video games provide emotional outlets for children, and that no conclusive evidence shows a link between video games and violence. In refuting these claims, I will prove to you that violent video games do in fact cause an increase in violence in our youth. So my response to his first claim, that youth is more affected by violence in other medias than they do have on video games. My opponent proposed to us that children witness violent events that they have no effect on their everyday lives, in movies and TV programs and in the news. He then went to prove this by showing us a study from 2001, which is highly outdated since more violent video games have been created since then. For example, Call of Duty, which wasn't created until 2003. In addition, this study is also a fallacy to the proposition because it states that video games has a smaller effect on violence than TV, rather than having no influence on violence whatsoever, as stated in the proposition. He then went on to say that youth aggression is caused from trade aggression and violence at home. When in fact, in a 2010 study by psychologist Craig Anderson of the American Psychological Association, he concluded that evidence strongly suggests that exposure to violent video games is a causal risk factor for aggressive behavior, aggressive cognition, and also decreases empathy and pro-social behaviors. Additionally, Brad Bushman, a psychologist from Ohio State University, did a similar study that concluded that in reviewing 381 effects from a study that included 130,000 people, playing video games did in fact increase aggressive thoughts, angry feelings, and physiological arousal. Now moving on to a second claim, that violent video games provide an emotional outlet for the youth. He claimed that violent video games allow children to explore violent activity without real-world consequences. He also then went on to say that violent video games help children relieve stress and can cure emotional problems. While these video games may relieve short-term stress, it can also lead to long-term desensitization. Psychologists from Iowa State did a study with 257 students in which 1/8 of these students, both including males and females, were randomly chosen to play a violent video game for 20 minutes. They were then shown a 10-minute video afterwards of real-life violence from TV programs and movies. Those who had played the violent video games beforehand had lower heart rates and lower skin responses when faced with real-life violence. While these games can relieve stress, the trade-off is that it makes children emotionally and psychologically desensitive, which is a real-life consequence. Now moving on to his third claim, that no conclusive evidence shows a link between video games and violence. Violent video games do not make children violent, but it is the violent children that decide to play them that act out in these violent ways. That is what my opponent stated in his speech. Although these video games may not be the beginning of their violent behavior, it does advocate and increase violent thoughts in those children who have been violent beforehand. A study by Dr. Gentle, Lynch, Linder, and Walsh from the Palo Alto Medical Foundation found that teens who play violent video games for long periods of time are in fact more aggressive, more prone to confrontation with their teachers and their peers, and see a decline in school achievements. This is mainly because continuous exposure can cause a child to believe that violence is an acceptable form of problem solving, which it is not. In conclusion, violent video games do affect children's psyches, cause desensitization, and cause aggression and violent backlash. After reviewing all the evidence that I proposed to you, I hope that all of you will agree with me that violent video games do in fact cause an increase in violence in the youth. Thank you.
All right, well, the issue is set up pretty clearly. You label the secondary claims. You've got a good general counterclaim that you're going to use to apply on the individual points as you get through it. You signpost the individual points as you get to each of them. I thought I saw one specific attack on the research that the advocate used on that first point for the data being outdated and the reference to the fact that games have become even more violent, and you use as an example Call of Duty. I thought that that was a good idea. I thought that there was also a good piece of analysis there that says, look, the advocate's own evidence says that it may not have the same effect as television, but it doesn't say it has no effect. It says it just simply has a lesser effect. And that, in fact, seems to concede the notion of the principle that you're arguing from the beginning. So I think that that's a good response on that point. And then you pump in other research that supports the conclusion that there are these negative consequences in this relationship, that it's causal, and it causes people to increase the thoughts of violence. I thought that, everything on the first point seemed to me to be very solid. You had a response to the advocate's reasoning, you had a response to their evidence, you had some counterclaim stuff that you're presenting there. That worked pretty well. On the second point, there's not much discussion of the advocate's information or reasoning on this particular point. Basically, you're relying on your own counter evidence to come up with an alternative conclusion. And I thought you did okay with that counter evidence, but again, whereas I thought your comparison on the first point was pretty strong, the comparison here is a little bit less so. And so it feels like, did you not have as much to say? Did they not make mistakes? Or did you feel like, well, the best response here is I'll cloud the issue by presenting another study? It feels like you needed to be a little bit, for lack of a better term, a little bit more aggressive here. All right, and then on the third point, same thing as the second one, and that is it's counterclaim stuff, and there's not really much contrast to the argument that the advocate presented. So I thought the first point you did a better job of what you were trying to do, and then the second and third points less so. All right, thank you.